There's no competition quite like the one that exists between brothers. From Cain and Abel to the Bee Gees, brothers have always been at each other's throats trying to outdo one another. While some get praised, others get cast out, or worse, forgotten. Baseball brothers Wes and Rick Ferrell would both make history, but only one would receive baseball's highest honor. On April 29, 1931, St. Louis Browns catcher and Hall of Famer Rick Ferrell had the pleasure of traveling to America's sixth city, Cleveland, Ohio, to play against his greatest rival, his irascible little brother, Wes. The Ferrells were a baseball family from the Blue Mountains of North Carolina. Wesley Ferrell was 3 years younger than his brother Rick, but made his major league debut a full 2 years before him pitching for the Cleveland Indians, while Rick languished in the minor leagues. Rick was signed to the Detroit Tigers and watched perplexed as other catchers on his team in Columbus, Ohio, got called up to the bigs to play for the Cincinnati Reds. Every time he inquired why, he was shut down and told to go back to Columbus and play ball. Feeling like he was being unfairly kept in the minors, he pleaded his case to baseball commissioner
Kennesaw Mountain Landis,
who was bestowed with a name so manly its utterance is a known fertility treatment.
When I take my sugar to tea, all the boys are jealous of me. Cause I never take her where the gang go when I take my sugar to tea.
Landis found that the Detroit Tigers had been illegally colluding with the Reds to keep Rick in the minors for their own financial gain. Rick was granted free agency by the commissioner and signed with the St. Louis Browns, making his debut with the team in 1929. That same year, Wes, the younger Ferrell, was given a full-time spot on the Indians roster and won 21 games on the mound and batted a nod-worthy .237, while his brother Rick only batted .229. By April 29, 1931, Wes was coming off of his second consecutive 20-win season, and Rick was beginning to be one of the most dependable hitters and catchers in the game. The brothers had played each other a number of times before, but this game would be different. Wes was a dominant pitcher and would continue to develop into one of the best pitching hitters in the game nearly a century before Shohei Ohtani would make his major league debut. In terms of raw physical talent, Wes was the better of the two and showed it that day. Not only did he get up on the mound and throw a no-hitter against his brother's Browns, but he also hit a home run and a double, racking up 4 RBIs in the 9-0 win. Rick went 0 for 3 on groundouts, but reached base on a throwing error. Surely he was proud of his brother, but the competitor inside of him was doubtlessly fuming. Wes continued to impress, throwing 20-win seasons in 1931 and 1932, becoming the only pitcher to begin their career with 4 consecutive seasons winning a score or more. He threw another pair of 20-winners in 1935 and 36. His hitting continued to improve, batting .347 in 1935 at the peak of his career. But after a shoulder injury, his temperament turned foul, and he was consistently at odds with umpires, managers, the world, and especially himself. Unable to cope with his declining performance, he would often refuse to leave the mound when pulled from a game. He would become utterly apoplectic with his teammates if their performance did not meet his standards. After one especially bad performance, he punched himself in the face and began violently smashing his head against the dugout wall. He had to be restrained by teammates to avoid seriously injuring himself. His irascibility on the mound was only matched by his brother's coolness behind the plate. Rick Ferrell had been traded to the Red Sox and had a deep understanding of the game within the game, and could read the field and call games like a chess master anticipating the opponent's next move. In 1934, Wes was traded to the Red Sox also, and the brothers formed a formidable battery for several seasons. But he was inevitably drawn into Wes's constant histrionics. And after a particularly bad incident with an umpire, both were traded to the Washington Senators. The incident began when Wes was on the mound and Rick was behind the plate, and the umpire missed a pivotal strike 3 call against Joe DiMaggio. Things then got pretty heated, and Wes said the one thing you don't say to umpires. He called him a cocksucker. He didn't stop there either. He called his wife a cocksucker. Then he said his children were a bunch of little cocksuckers. And then Rick got involved and said the umpire's mother was in the locker room before the game, and that he shouldn't be so upset about having a whole family of cocksuckers because there was a depression on and somebody had to make some money while he was out and about just suck for free. They were on the train to Washington, D.C. the next morning. Injury plagued Wes's career, eventually ending it in 1941. However, Rick was one of the original Ironmen of baseball, catching 1,806 games in a time when sports medicine consisted of dirt, tobacco juice, and a mason jar full of moonshine. It was an endurance record that would stand for 4 decades until Carlton Fisk surpassed it in 1988. For the Veterans Committee, it would be the career-defining superlative that secured him a plaque in Cooperstown in 1984. Rick had a perfectly decent lifetime batting average of .281, low for the Hall but commendable for a catcher. Wes nearly matched Rick in batting average, hitting .280, but surpassed him in home runs while setting an all-time record for pitchers with 38. He also pitched 6 20-win seasons. But despite all of this, Wes Ferrell was denied entry into baseball's Great Hall. Many blame his combative and uneven temperament, but it was likely his 4.04 ERA and having walked 55 more batters than he struck out that is ultimately to blame. They are brothers divided for eternity by fame and infamy. During his Hall of Fame induction ceremony in 1984, 8 years after Wes's death, Rick Ferrell took a moment to remember his spectacularly talented younger brother and the good-natured fraternal competition that existed between them. He said, "I guess what I'm doing here, hopefully, is putting up a stick for Wes." When the audience seemed confused, he said, "Wes would understand. You see, we've been putting sticks up for each other for a long time. Back when Wes and I and our 4 brothers were growing up on the farm near Greensboro, we used to go into a field and take hitting practice. If one of us hit the ball a long way, we'd go and put a stick up at that point, and then if somebody hit it further, he'd run out and move the stick and stick it in the ground where his ball stopped. After we both made it to the major leagues, my team was playing his one day in 1933. I was catching for Boston, and he was pitching for the Cleveland Indians. Well, I hit a home run off of Wes, and he was watching me trot around the bases, and when I got to second, I yelled to Wes, 'Hey Wes, go put a stick up for that one.' Wes got mad and started to kick the mound, but he came to the plate in the following inning, and he hit a home run. As he crossed the plate, he looked at me with a big smile on his face and said, 'Okay, Rick, looks like you're going to have to go move the stick.'" When contemplating the relationship that exists between brothers, it reveals itself to be as simple as it is complex and full of contradictions. It is one of pride and admiration, but also of spite and consternation. It makes one wonder what strange creatures brothers are. For the game that brings them together is the same that breaks one's heart.
What good are days without sunshine? You made the skies of a blue. Now that you're gone, days are dreary. What good am I without you?
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Atwood, the host of Baseball Will Break Your Heart. First off, thank you for listening. I also want to take a second to tell you about our next big feature, Enemies of All Mankind, due out this spring. It's based on a true crime story set in the city of Pittsburgh, featuring drugs, pirates, baseball, deviant mascots, hard partying fans, shocking betrayal, and more drugs. It was the biggest baseball scandal of the 1980s that got the Steel City all bent out of shape. Come listen to it all fall apart on Baseball Will Break Your Heart.